Thank you for having me. My name is Wenix, which means echoing through a mountain canyon as it comes off the ground, like the echo of the past. My last name, Red Elk, is Umatilla, and I'm a member of the Unitel Confederated Tribes. I'm Nez Perce, Cayuse, Umatilla. I got a little Umatilla, but I'm mostly Cayuse, Nez Perce. And so today what we're going to start with is the way Department of Natural Resources manages our first foods is based off our tribal Tamunwit. Tamunwit means a natural law, the law of nature. And it is the first law that governs Native Americans, especially in our tribe within the Plateau region. And so when we talk about this, the best one to tell this is one of our tribal elders and our language speakers is Thomas Morning Owl. And I work closely with him, and his mother was one of my closest teachers, and was my grandma's great niece, because my grandma, she was about 45 when she had kids, and so all of our close relatives, which I would consider my first cousins, are all up into those older ages. And so this is Thomas Morning Owl, and then after that we will get started, but this kind of sets up why we do the work we do.
Then creation was complete, man and woman, the yellow of the earth, the red of our blood, the red of our life, the blue of the heavens above, our spirit. We were created in these three steps in our belief. But the Creator had already had things on this world that were here prior. So as a man stood on the east side looking to the west, and the woman stood on the west looking to the east, all creation came before them. The first to speak and give of himself. And he spoke for all the life, the water life that followed him was a salmon. As the first food, he gave the sacrifice of himself. After salmon, all the water life named of itself. All the salmonoid species, all the resident fish species, down to the shako, the clams. The second to speak of the first foods was the deer. The deer gave of himself to be our food. He gave us his bones to become our tools. He gave his skin to become our clothing. And then he also gave to us one of the biggest gifts of his hide to make the drum. After the deer spoke, and all the animals that walked the land named themselves in order, the first foods as they went along. Elk, antelope, moose, buffalo, even down to the groundhog, which is a food as well. And they gave a promise that they can never change. And from the day of the beginning to this day, they're still the same. So then creation turned and looked to the west, and it was the woman who stood. Then all the plant life, the roots that we use, named themselves to her. And the first to speak was the bitter root. I am Yahweh. I will be your food. But before anybody harvests, you've got to have a ceremony to recognize that new growth. And that was the law that was made. Then the roots, all in order, named themselves. Many roots. Luke, Chal, Sesmita, Anipash, Manku, Mammon, all kinds of different roots. And some of them we don't even harvest now these days ourselves. And then the berries then spoke to the woman. And they named themselves in the order. But the one to speak was the Wilna, huckleberry. And like any good grandmother, wanted to see all of her children go first before her. That's why she was always served at the last part, at the end. Then after all the berries named themselves in the order that they give themselves, then creation all looked back to the mat. came back and never changed, never broke that promise. The animals that live in the mountains that can never change, they've never broken that promise. But when European people have come and brought us all the easy things of life, many years ago it was the gun, metal, knives, things were easy, made easier, canvas, homes, cars, airplanes, TV, internet, everything this day that makes our life easier takes us that much farther away from our first foods. We're the ones that have changed. And it's up to us now to change ourselves back, to reacquaint ourselves with that great law that can never be changed. Chi, Iwana Pushtash to Malachim, Nami Autin Patikurat Miyai. This is a testimony I give in relationship to our first foods, the holy and sacred foods. Our Geragushtash, Kashabawachah Gaisha, Nami Minash in Miyai. And I commit this to recording for the future of my children. That perhaps it will never be left behind. Charles Schwachi in Misinwi, because these are not my words. Kushashash. I'm only repeating, echoing the words of my elders.
I always have to wait for a second because Thomas, he is one of our strongest cultural leaders, language speakers, and we don't have very many of them left. His mother, he had a really close connection with her, and so when all of us that watch it and play it, we always have to kind of take a minute to come back because we were so close to her. She was our teacher, and so is he. So it's just, it really sets up the work that we do. So what I'm going to talk about today is called Outni Tokata. When we're talking about our first foods, when you say Outni in front of something, it's talking about a holy teaching that's bound from the beginning of time. It's sacred. And whenever we work with the foods that came forward first for us, we have that reciprocal responsibility to them. And so this is the work that we do. And so the Unitel Confederated Tribes, those 3 tribes were founded in 1855 at the signing of the treaty in the Walla Walla Valley. Over in this area, I don't know if you can see the little white cursor there. So this little red area is the Unitel Reservation, and it's pretty checkerboarded when the Oregon Trail came through and they opened up the Dog Allotment Act and they were doing those land grabs, and we really got checkerboarded at that time. And also, when that happened, when the treaty was signed, it formed the Cayuse, the Umatilla, which is the Umatilla, and the Wiliwakoo people, which is the what we call the Walla Walla. At that time, there was about 1,500. Currently, we have about 3,100 tribal members. At that time, we ceded 6.4 million acres, And as you see this gray line, it reaches all the way up into Richland, Washington, all the way down towards, going towards the Dells, down towards John Day, Baker area, and then up around the Dayton, Idaho area, going towards Washington on the upper side. And that's the 6.4 million acres. When they ceded that land, when you're talking about ceded, you're talking about reserving rights. For what we gave, we retained. We retained, meaning we never gave away the rights to be able to fish, to be able to hunt, to be able to gather or harvest, the ability to have health care, the ability to sovereignly govern ourselves, and the ability to have a place where we live, which is on the reservation, and also to be able to graze and have livestock, which there's not very many of us that actually do. We have some, not very many. At that time, we had about 250,000 acres, and then when the Dawes Development Act came in and knocked it down to about 150,000 acres, we've been working on buying that back and reestablishing that through a lot of different funds from BPA related to different areas that are endangered when it comes to salmon endangered, trout endangered. What we like to do is go in and purchase land. So we might look at a site and say we're going to go in and restore that site. We like to be the owners from ridgetop to ridgetop, and when we do the restoration, if we can, it's better that way if we own, so we can control the access and do really large projects. So this is kind of an area, and this is what we call our density map. And the darker brown area shows kind of the consistency where we were. We also have what's called a usual and custom areas. Those are areas that we were going to in the beginning prior to the signing of the treaty. When they developed this map, working with other tribal elders and going through different journals, oral histories, they realized that the map was already wrong. We were traveling all the way to the coast, all the way down to Salt Lake City, further into Wyoming, up in Montana, Canada, and so we're working on updating that. Our Department of Natural Resource mission is based off of the community and what we do within that community. We want to make sure that culture comes first when we're leading, and to help relate the way that we're managing our foods across the landscape. And so our tribal elders would talk about what is culture. Culture is what? It's tamunwit, or tamawit. What is clear, pure water? We need that for salmon, because if the water's dirty, not only the salmon, but every other species and the land and the aquifers that water is interacting with, and the people that are drinking it. And so we got to make sure that that's number one, because we start seeing that people have many different ailments. Cancer. You see kids that have higher ADHD, autism. Where is that coming from? We see people, there's a lot more people with allergies these days. And it's because of whatever's interacting with the system, within the system, how the food is cultivated. And there's just a lot of different things that a lot of people haven't really looked. So we have to keep this land as clean as we can. And even though it is dirty, we have to work on working towards making that water more pure. And how do we get there? We wanted to make sure that what was driving us was also reflected in our tribal elders and our women. They talked about who's talking about the first foods, who's talking about the root species. The men are always talking about salmon and water. Who is taking care of those foods? So the Department of Natural Resources mission is to protect, restore, and enhance first foods, which is chush, water, nusach, salmon, yamish, deer, chaush, which is the biscuit root, and miwanu, which is huckleberry, for the perpetual, cultural, and sovereign economics of the tribe. We do this by utilizing traditional ecological knowledge, the knowledge of the people, and cultural knowledge, and science to inform two things: population and habitat management goals, and natural resource policies. tribal people across this landscape were always managing the land. They managed it with fire. As they gathered for their teepees, for their resources, they gathered in a way so the resource would come back better. When we fished, we were always told to fish a certain way, where you take certain ones, the ones that were banged up, and leave the stronger. When you hunt, you don't always take those branch antlers. You leave the big ones in. When the elder women or the people of the longhouse, they call the men in, they say, we need you to go out hunting for us because we haven't named me. My family needs meat. There's a funeral. They'll say, don't get me a bull. I want you to get me a younger one. You know, they will tell them what to get because I don't want that to be gamey. I don't want it to be a certain way. And so people, they tell you kind of what you want. And don't bring me back anything that's not cleaned and done right. So, you know, so we're managed not only by the policies that are driven, but also by your matriarchy, the older elders of our community, of how we go out together and how to do it in the right way. We've always restored. So even within waterways where springs were, the women would go in and pull the cattails and open up those springs and open up those channels to help the flow of the water so it didn't stay stagnant. There's a story a couple hundred years ago that talks about an area where we live in Pendleton, up in the upper mountain range. And at that time, there was bands, Willow band, different bands that lived in those areas. And at that time, they noticed that the salmon run in a particular stream was very weak. So they got all the other band chieftainship, the leaders of those bands, like we say tribes, but we're like bandship versus clan up in these areas. And so they pulled them all together and they say, we want you to not fish that stream and let everybody know they can't fish that stream for a number of years. And we're going to try to bring that population back. And they went to another stream that was teeming with salmon. And they took the stomach of elk and deer, and they went to where those reds were, and they transferred the eggs into moss. And then they put them within the stomach. And then they added water, and then they brought them back over to the neighboring stream and recreated it, because they understood that they knew that system, because that's the life they lived. And they recreated that red in there, and after several years, that stream came back. We're always taught, when you go out and gather, you don't gather one place, you gather across. When you're gathering roots, you turn the land, you fluff it up, you're aerating it, you take the tops and you put it back in. So instead of a land that hasn't been processed, it hasn't been touched, turns like clay. It's hard. When somebody's been interacting with it, like camas fields that are still being accessed and dug every year, the camas is teeming because every time you dig, you put the top back in. So instead of a couple seeds penetrating ground that's like cement, you're dropping in 150 seeds at one time. And so it's the interaction of tribal people to be able to be on that landscape. So with our Department of Natural Resources, those deers, those animals are representing whole entire species sets within their species groups. So with the water, because we have water rights, it's protected, and we have a water resource program that protects those. Our fishing is protected by our fisheries rights, and our fishery program works to restore them and all the other fish in that line, or the aquatics, all the way down to the microorganisms. Our wildlife program, they take care of all the animal related, and when you look at water, fish, and hunting, it's also the habitats and the interaction of the water and the channels and how they work ecologically together. Our roots is taken care of by our range, ag, and forestry program. And so when you're looking at the root system, you're looking at everything with the root system, from foods to the plants to the medicines, to the other cultural items that we use. Weewanu represents shrubs, from little shrubs all the way to the upper overstory. So you're talking about every plant within a forest system, within a river system. throughout the land, because all those foods, all those plants, they have a name, they have a use, and they have a use to other animals that use them for food themselves. And they're important to the importance to that area. We have a cultural resource protection program that looks at protecting the sites of where those foods are and the importance of the cultural sites where we go to practice those older sites and our ancestors that are found below and above the ground and the importance that they have to that space. Our First Foods Policy Program, they work to create policies such as water policy, salmon policy. We're working on the wolf policy. Policies to be able to manage those foods in better space. We have environmental science that looks at the science and the chemistry behind those things, and in areas they work a lot with Hanford Nuclear Waste Facility to clean up the reservation and correct those rights that are related to there, and to work with them as we're co-managers. And when you look at that 6.4 million acres and beyond, we're co-managers within all those water basins. That's spread out throughout there and beyond. And education outreach. I do education outreach for all those programs and the tribe in general and any other tribal entity that they send to, because I've been doing it for a long time. I'm the main one, but we just slowly started bringing people in, so I've been doing this for a while. So when we're talking about in the longhouse, when we go do these, and how it relates to that culture, is we have to have those foods there because we have little people that we have to teach. And every year we have First Foods Feast. We cannot go out and gather salmon. We cannot go out hunting. We cannot go gather roots until we have these feasts. And the salmon's separate, the root feasts are separate. And so the leader of that longhouse will go, okay, it's time, it's ready for us to go. So if the state had salmon fishing and said, all right, the salmon are coming, you guys can buy tags and you can go out. We can't go out until our elder says, they're running, you guys go out and fish. And whoever catches the first salmon, you need to bring it to us. And once they catch the first salmon, they go ahead and catch enough for the dinner. They bring it in a traditional manner, how it was done from the beginning of time. And then they bring the brother back down to the water because of the interaction that he has and his immortality. And they put him down in a ceremonious way. After we have the feast all together on that Sunday, after that is done, then they can fish. No other tribe in our area, Umatillas, Warm Springs, Nez they have to have that first feast. It doesn't matter if anyone else is fishing. We can't, because that's what we abide to from those cultural teachings. And so in this image you see there's kids on one side and there's kids on the other. After we have the first feast, we have what's called the Children's Feast, where they take the little guys from 3, 4, 5, 6, and they start teaching them songs, teaching them what to expect, and they bring them up on top of the mountain, and they invite the high schoolers to help them, so they get a shadow that works with them, and they invite the families. And so we all go up, and there's usually about 120 of us across the hill house, and all the little kids gather, and they bring down, and they learn how to set the table and put things on themselves, the order that they have to serve. Once they become diggers, they have to give things away to recognize that they are now food providers. And so it's something that we've been doing to enforce culture, or promote it, because for a while we have lost a lot of it. So for example, in this area, you see the lines. The tables represent actually tables in a longhouse. And the dirt is in the middle in between those tables. And then right where you see my little cursor coming across right here, the drum line, which is called the 7 drummers, they would set right here facing the east, and they drum. And as they drum, there'll be a man that comes out, because the water, the salmon, the deer species are men's foods. All the others are the women's foods. And so a man in the ceremony will come out and set water first, because it's the first of all living things in creation. And then I'm gonna start clicking, and you're gonna kind of see round things that go on top of these tables. When we do our ceremony, a man will come out and they stand up in the multiple lines of from the oldest to the youngest, and they all carry a couple plates. And the first man in line would put his plates down, and then the next person would put his plates down, and this plate represents salmon. Any other aquatic species, if they had lamprey, lamprey would come next. If they had sturgeon, the sturgeon would come after the lamprey, because within its season that you harvest, it's later within the season. And so the food is put down in the time that it is within their season. So the first part of the table represents the aquatic species. And then once you get all the food up, the gray represents all the aquatics. From the time they start coming up the river to the end, you would have whitefish, you would have salmon, you would have eel, you would have steelhead. And so whatever food comes in, we organize it in the way it comes up in the species. And so the cook in there, they cook everything separate so they can recognize where it is. So when you're looking at the table, you're seeing the grouping of the species and how they come up within their time of their lives. When the animals for the deer, that would be the brown plate. And that would represent that order. And then you have the roots. I'm going to start with celery, pioche, loch, hausch. If you had moss, moss would be behind that. And so you have a lot of different foods, and it just comes in the timing that you gather. In the same way with the huckleberries. And so when you see that table, it looks so simple because you just see a line of food, but what you're missing is that the foods are grouped by grouping species, timing, and it's the ecological order of each one. And for some reason, we didn't have salmon. We wouldn't put another fish in its place, like something from the coast that's not, we don't recognize in that manner, because it's, or even, it might come at a different, but we just don't put it within that order. Anything of common food will all go on that outer side around those foods. We never set them in that order because that table represents that traditional law that was given to us from the beginning of time. It is that it is the Tamanwat, the natural law. When the sun rises in the east, it follows its path all the way to the west, and it sets. That's its natural path. It never diverts. When the salmon are born in the streams, they're there for a year or so, wherever they're at. They go out to the ocean, and they stay out there for a specific amount of time. And then they turn around and come back and get ready. They prepare themselves. We're at the mouth. When the salmon turn around and come back, they acclimate out there. And they get beat up out there. They get preyed on, and all kinds of things happen. But they have to change their bodies. They see their bodies preparing. It's changing for the promise they made at the beginning of time. They're adjusting from the salt water to the fresh water. And as they prepare, then they come back to do their work that they promised in the beginning of time. And they fall all the way up, they spawn, they die, and that is their path. They never divert. When we were created, Creator gave the voice to us. And so our responsibility is that if we see that there's something wrong with those foods, it is our responsibility to protect them for the life that they gave for us. And when those foods leave from the system, we will become sick also. And the land will become sick because they're important to the land. So we still have traditional feasts. Some of them are still held in Tulimat lodges and setting to the ground, but us in our longhouse, we've adapted to tables, but the songs are still the same. The things are still the same. And our songs were gifted at a time. They usually say that people that have passed away in a near-death accident, maybe they're brought back, maybe they died for a couple days, come back after a couple days. Especially the old ones, before the embalming, you'd hear this more often. A couple years ago, I had a friend, he messaged me. He said, my aunt passed away this morning. We're going to go hunting for her, and we're going to be back in the evening. And so he messaged me in the evening. He said, "You'll never guess what happened." He said, "They brought my aunt down to the morgue of the hospital." He said, and she woke up 10 hours later. And she was down there they're like, what the heck? It was before they did everything to her. And so after she came out, they bring her to ceremony, and she said she came back with songs, and she came back with a message for those people. And so it still happens today. And sometimes when they say our songs are what comes back from some of those things. And one of the songs that we sing, they're songs that come from the other side. And so when we talk about our foods, one of the ones that's specific, I would like to share a little bit of it. It goes, Ona metta tukata ana kanasha, ona metta tukata ana kanasha, heya 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 heya, ona jushi basapaki gana, ona jushi basapaki ga wakashawana, heya 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 heya. These songs are what lead us. As food gatherers and diggers, they say those songs come to us in the time of need, and also tell us that it's time to get ready to go out and gather. It's time to do this work. So I'm kind of show you how food interacts within a certain area, in a water basin. So over here, this is my cursor. Over here is the reservation boundary in orange. We've had a little bit more land established since then. So this is the reservation in Umatilla. The white line represents one watershed basin, which is the Umatilla. And in the Umatilla watershed basin, and this is the Columbia up here. So this is the Columbia, and it comes all the way down to McNary Dam. And then the Umatilla River shoots up this way. Historically, fish ran throughout all those rivers. But when the irrigation systems came, they dried out all the streams, and the salmon disappeared for about over 80 years. The tribe worked with the tribe, the U.S. Forest Service, the Umatilla Watershed Basin, the irrigation district to try to get the water back in, and they restored salmon back to the Umatilla. When a species leaves from an area, the people that were going to those specific fishing spots along that area, they stopped going. So for 80 years, and each fishing spot had stories about families, had certain things related to certain rock structures, to what was there in the land, certain stories. But as they left, we lost languages related to specific places. We lost certain cultural practices that happened there. We lost different culture interaction, and we lost knowledge of that riverway as they used to interact all the time. And so they heard about them through a second-hand knowledge, but not as a first time. And you can't call yourself a fisherman if you're not able to fish yourself versus just to hear about it. So everything starts at the beginning of spring, and we're down in the lower elevation in the riverways in the watershed. And so as April, May, June come in, we start harvesting a little bit more in the foothills of the Blue Mountains, and the roots become ready. The deers in that area, you start seeing this interaction coming across the land. And so this root right here, this color represents our couch. Our bitter root, it doesn't even grow in this area. We have to go down to Hetner like 2.5, 3 hours, or 4 hours towards LeGrand to the Union area. We have to travel for some of these foods that are very specific. And then when we're nomadic, we're able to continue to go all year. And so we started losing information about, like what Thomas said, we don't gather everything because some of those are a long ways away, and not everybody has access to the resource to get to those places if you don't have a good truck and gas money and to be able to get out to those sites. And then as the season goes by, you're up into the huckleberries, where right now we're at the tail end, you're gathering choke cherries, you're gathering medicine, and you're hunting for elk. And so we go from the bottom of the system all the way up to the top of the system, the uplands. And so if you look at that tribal longhouse table, you see the water, the fish, the deer, the roots, and how that table represents just one watershed. Our tribe, through our mission statement, we created what's called the river vision by looking at different components of that watershed basin, which includes a healthy river capable of providing first food, sustainable, and the continuity of the tribe's culture. And the vision requires that the river is dynamic, it's interchanged, it has connections, the shape of it, the physical and biological processes, and the interaction and interconnection of it. So basically, when you see this river system, you need a river system that it flows, it bends, it downwells underneath these channels because it's cleaning and it's cooling as it comes out. You need good vegetation along the riverbank. And also in this area, we have multiple springs that are feeding. We have little back wells, we have ripples, we need all that interaction and looking at how fast the river's running, the timing, the hydrology, the aquatic biota that lives within it, and the first foods that grow on it. And so when we're doing a restoration project, we look at all those components and how do we fix the river, not just by planting, but how do we look at every single component and fix it to a healthy state. So we created a vision of how we get there. We also have an upland vision that we created too, and that's the same way as we are not only managing from the bottom of the system, we're managing all the way from the upper part of the system because it's all connected. The water flows down from the top and goes all the way down and comes all the way out to the river. And so whatever happens in our hills eventually works its way down here. So we want to make sure that we're managing anything that's coming across. Any toxic chemical that's coming across our reservation, we have to know what it is, what's coming, what's carrying it. If something happens, how are we going to contain that so we don't destroy whatever's on the reservation or all those foods within those areas. So we try to take it all in. So we create benchmarks, planning tools, and how do we manage the landscape in the best way for the big range animals and for the animals that are migrating in the migrating corridors. And looking at using traditional knowledge of our people and the knowledge that they have from generation to generation to generation, and taking that knowledge and saying, okay, there used to be so many elk in this area, but they're not there no more. Are they missing food? What's going on? How do we bring that back? Oh, the forest is so dense, so what we're going to do is we're going to go in and thin it, and we're going to burn it and create better meadows. We used to do that a long time ago. As we traveled, we would burn certain areas and create meadows because we knew that it would bring in the game. So when we were hunting, they're like, as you travel, well, no, because we just burned that last year, that animal's going to be in that area because the grass it's better, it's greener, it has more nutrients. And so we knew those things. And so we're working to apply those and having our technical staff and scientists help us be not just managers in one sense, but twice the managers by applying both knowledge. So when you're looking at all of this, how does it relate to our culture? We have to have those feasts. So we have a celery feast, salmon feast, root feast, huckleberry feast in different times. And so these are some of our first foods diggers. And these are the women that will go out. And some of the foods here, we have salmon, the bitterroot, the huckleberries. And as you see right now, the women are ordering this men. Stand up in line. Oldest to youngest, and this is the leader of the longhouse, and he's going to lead them in. And we put all those food out, and we put them in their sections, and we'll be like, okay, go. As soon as they start, they're running. It's really exciting to watch it. It's really exciting. We have to have those ceremonies and those foods because we go through different ceremonies as individuals. We have the first salmon and the first kill. So this young man right here, Kayako, is one of my best friend's son. And he ended up getting his first salmon and first kill in the same year. And that's pretty expensive because you have to have a giveaway and take all that meat or that fish and feed the people with it and have a giveaway. And he gives everything away, all the way down to his gun, to the clothes he is wearing. And when he calls people's name, they will give him something back. And he'll eventually get a brand new gun, clothing, bullets, also knowledge of how to hunt in a good way. So it's the passing of that knowledge. Once he becomes a hunter, anybody that asks him, as long as he can go, his family are responsible to help him. He becomes a hunter not only for his family, but for the tribe. And same as the girls. And they have their first digging and their first picking. So the work that I do, and the thing that I'm most excited about, because I get to talk about a little bit of the work and the new direction. We work really hard at educating the outside about our first foods and our mission and the work that we're doing. And we make sure that when we're managing, every program, every project has to say, how are they managing? Is their project related to water? Is it related to habitat, fish, wildlife? And they have to check all those as a checkbox. What are the benefits to those? Is there any? How does that interaction work? And so they have to be responsible for what they're doing in the management, always for every project. So we decided we've done a good job. Let's start having, after about 10 years, we worked really hard and we were really sustaining those foods. And we wanted to bring our tribal members out to areas that we have a lot of land that's landlocked. And so we've worked with many partners to get access to some of those lands. And some of the lands we have found that there's foods there that we have never seen. We had to what is this? And we had to go back to other elders and they're like, oh, that's pukla. And we hadn't seen it. We didn't know because those areas were landlocked to us. And so we're like, let's start doing our first foods outreach excursions to bring out the people that don't have elders to teach them, that don't have family members, or they don't have vehicles, or they don't have money to get out there, or they're a little bit scared to go by themselves. And let's provide a safe space and help bring back the culture we've lost. So one of my jobs is to bring them out. We look to teach them how to identify, to locate, and we also document them. So prior to us bringing people out, I have to go out and hunt down different areas and to find out where foods are. And so I take a GPS unit and we do tagging of it, and then we look at the population of that. If it has a big population, can it fit 22 people I'm bringing up, or is there not enough? And we can watch it, and there's not a lot of knowledge anywhere about our root species and those critical foods. And so we're working on how do we manage them better, because there's not a lot out there. And so we're bringing our youth and our elders out and helping promote language also. We work with many programs such as the BOSA program, Workforce program. Those are programs to set up to help teach tribal members and people that are more critical, where they might be more at risk. And so we want to be able to provide them trainings to help get them into the workforce. So maybe they just have had a tough life. How do we bring our people back? When you bring people back to culture, it saves them. We have people that were addicts, that were just lost, possibly alcoholics, or just lost several people down at the end of the road. But when you apply tradition and culture and bring them back to the land where they're able to get out there and do healthy practices, you help strengthen that back. This is us digging across the landscape for camas. We had dug camas for like 50 plus years just because the resource in our area was destroyed, so we waited. And I remember being told about it, and for 30 years I watched and watched and watched, and we're like, you know what, it's time. So we started going together. We had forgotten knowledge of how to cook under the ground, so we pulled in some of our people from Warm Springs, our people from Nez Perce to help us regain the knowledge. They just had a camas bake last week, and they're still learning. They burnt a little bit of things and they're kind of upset, but that knowledge would be passed down every single year, and when it's gone, how do we revitalize it? It's not something that's lost, it's just dormant, and how do we bring it back? And if we have to reach out, we reach out to our other tribes to help bring back that knowledge and that teaching. So this is us, we brought the kids to look on, and they learned how to gather, how to dig, how to bake. The canvas has to bake for 4 days, and this is them digging it up, we're putting it up, canning on site, and then these kids gathered all these foods. Those kids, we decided we're gonna teach them every single food that we can find out there. They had more food across that table that they had dug that had been seen on the longhouse table for 40, 50 plus years. And we're like, we're just gonna teach them everything we know. And so this is the work that we're doing, is to bring those foods back to the table and to complete that promise we made. We decided we're gonna go find Wapato because we hadn't had it in our area. We can remember like 70, 80 plus years, because in some places it was eradicated. So we took us a year to work with different biologists, and people were like, if you find us, let us know, please. And so they were like, we think we found some up in the upper Richland part of our ceded territory. So we all jumped in, all 9 of us, and we're like, let's go check it out. So we went and found it, and then we're like, okay, well, we're gonna dig it. We did not know how to dig it. We only heard about it. So we had to dig, and we first dug in the mud. It was really hard. We were getting stuck. It was kind of dangerous in the mud because there's glass and stuff. And then I'm like, I'm gonna go and try to do it in the stream. So I did it in the stream. I'm like, hey, you guys, it's easier like this. We can, I go, if you take the shovel and go like this, they start popping up. And so we all worked together and started working as a team. And after we were done, we took a stagnant area, as you see right here, that green, and we cut a channel from the water, and the whole water started moving. And thousands of seeds started going downstream. After we worked that area, the beaver came in and restructured the whole area. So that's that interaction we have. We created a memorandum of agreement specifically with the city of Richland related to this waterway and how we're protecting it. So once we found out, we started reaching out and seeing how can we protect this resource. So this is us, super happy, one of the hardest routes I've ever done. We're getting ready to go dig it very soon, and oh, it's cold, it gets cold. You can cook it in the fire, you can boil it, steam it, we've canned it, we've dried it, we've ground it. We're trying to get everybody used to it because it's a resource they're not used to on their palate. It's pretty starchy in September, so later in October, November, it's not as much starch, but the water is frigid. And me and water don't mix right, because every time I go out and it's cold, I get sick every time. So I'm like, we can go, but we need to go pretty soon. So we're planning a trip here soon. And so it's really good for phosphorus, potassium, vitamin B, complex, iron, copper, magnesium. It's basically the building blocks of your organs. And it's a winter resource. You can still find it within its areas, and it stores underneath the water because it's insulated when it freezes in the mud, so it's still found there. So when people were starving, in that time, it helps production of brain, eyesight, it helps so if they were starving and they had no other resources, they could go get Wapato, and it's super high in protein, it's super high in iron, magnesium, everything to keep you living and to build your organs and to help you heal, and energy, and it actually slows it slows the way different things are absorbed and different sugars and stuff flow. So, but it's a mega house of, it's like an omega-3, you know, it's like a superfood. So we're working on, the knowledge of huckleberry basket making, which is the Sally bags, and we all see the beautiful work. Nobody did it in our area. And we're like, okay, we're bringing people to go gather huckleberries, but we're not making the baskets. And so I reached out to a woman, her name was, I got her name from multiple people that I know. They're like, she teaches classes, but she's getting older, so you need to get a hold of her as soon as you can, because she's 80 this year. I get a hold of her, lo and behold, it's my man's grandma. Like sister grandma, but, and he goes, oh, Ramona, that's my grandma. I go, you didn't tell me how to huckleberry basket maker, I could have reached a long time. So she had to teach us how to dig cedar root, and that's some hard work. And I tell you what, she rides around in a little cart because she can't move very well, so we had to walk her really slowly to get her out there. And we had to walk across the stream. And so as you see her, she's sitting there, right here, and she goes sitting down right here. And she's digging, and you have to undo the whole root system. And I'm sweating, I'm like, I feel like giving up and go gathering the easy way like these guys. And she said, they're gathering easy, but that stuff breaks. And you want the really big stuff because it lasts longer. And when she moved, she literally just laid down and rolled. And I was thinking, this woman is 78. And I was just like, I give up. And I was thinking, I hope that at that age that I can still be able to talk or teach. Because we're told that once you become a knowledge keeper, that even if you can't go out and gather, you still have to teach. Because if you keep that knowledge locked up, when you pass away, you go with everything that you had, and you take that knowledge from your people. There's 3,000 of us in a world with billions, and we're the only ones that have knowledge. And only a certain specific part of us have real cultural knowledge. And you can't get that in books. I mean, you can, but not the way you get it from your own people. So it's the most precious thing that we have, is that cultural practices. So right here, you see them on the river. We went down after we were washing in this river, and as we're washing all those roots, she was telling us there were certain parts of the big roots that had, it looked like it died, and she said, oh yeah, she said, the cedar root wasn't like that before. She said, about 10 years ago, it got really hot. It was the year that the salmon bellied up in the river. And the ground got so hot, it killed part of that cedar root. And so she was able, her knowledge was the year that the salmon bellied up in the river. So the next time we go and gather cedar root, what are we going to see from this year? The salmon bellied up in the river all across the Columbia. Once it got down in the middle tributaries along Celilo, they got so hot, they just floated up and they died and they exploded. So on the banks, there was just lots of salmon everywhere. And then if they're catching in nets, they're like, you know, they're so far gone, and we haven't seen that in a very long time. And they just, it's been a long time, except, and that was the summer run. This run that's going on right now, it's one of the biggest years they've ever seen since they started counting. Because, and we think it's an interaction because when there was no market there, because nothing was open, they didn't really have a market, so they weren't fishing as much, and so it gave them a breath. So it's important when we look at the resources, you know, we have to manage in a way. And for us, we have policies that protect them. So if they look at the run counts before they say you can have a fishery or what you can do with it. And when they look at that, they'll say, okay, there's not enough salmon going in the upper streams, so you're not going to fish this year. You might not fish for 20 years if that count isn't what we feel is sustainable. And we have fisheries all over, and we implant in every stream that will support life in that stream. And so to be able to help bring it back, but we're constantly addressing and assessing every week with all the tribes of what's best for them. Where to shut off those runs, what's the best for that salmon, because we want it to be sustainable. So in this picture, we're cleaning these. First time that we ever gathered, And I was like, I wonder how long it's been since Indian people have been down here. So you know there's seed there. So you know that they were gathering there because seed only grows in certain areas, and for baskets, you know, they had to go there. And so we're cleaning them. I was like, it's probably been a long time. And I'm thinking, all of a sudden, this old Indian guy comes through, and he has long, shaky hair, and he's wearing a bandana, and you can tell he's probably from like the 60s and 70s. He had the short shorts with the slides up, and he had the white tube socks and went all the way up to his knees with the old like Nikes, and had the band around it, and he walks up, and I'm just watching him. I was like, this is a real old guy. He's like, what are you guys doing? He goes, I seen all these Indians jumping out. There's like 23 of us. And we stayed in Portland. This is the first time we ever did this, so we're really excited. We're gonna learn how to make baskets. But we gotta go gather this first. And I said, well, we're gonna learn how to make huckleberry baskets. And this tribal elder from Yakima, she's gonna come to our res next weekend and show us how to do it. So she's telling us how to clean it right now. And then we have to split it and spend all week long for 10 hours a day cutting it, getting it ready just to do a basket. And then we had a still process. So he said, my grandma used to do that. I live across the river in Yakima. He said, has anybody prayed and sung a song for you? I'm like, no. So I'm sitting there and he starts singing. And I get really emotional. I'm like, this is what brings your culture to you. The connection of a place and the importance of that. And I was thinking, I wonder how long it's been since this part of the river heard us singing, because they always say to sing to it. When we're fishing before they go out, and so my partner, he gills nets and he fishes, and when they're going out in the nighttime, we go out down to the water and we offer and pray to it to protect them and keep them safe, because the water always takes. Every year we lose fishermen, and what the importance, but it's that interaction, how to respect the water and respect those animals and respect those things. But when you start bringing things back, you see all these other beautiful things that happen. And it was a real, like, kind of a healing moment. It was just like, we're doing good work, we're getting blessed. And so this is a week later, we have this is the first time in our area we had basket makers in 50, 60 plus years. And so the year of the pandemic, we were supposed to bring her back that spring so we could finish our baskets. And then we were going to go to Mount Adams with her. She's going to teach us to gather the bear grass. And we haven't been able to bring her back since. But since then, I've gathered some bear grass. What she told me, she was trying to show me through the phone, and she was taking videos, and I did the best I could. I'm hoping on the way home that I gather more down here on the way back, because we don't have that resource there. We've got to go all the way to gather it. So when you look at huckleberry baskets from the Wascos, there's a lot of design. In our area, they're mostly brown with a little bit of design because we didn't have as much. So those are old baskets. But those huckleberry baskets are really important because they help keep the berries longer. We're a first foods associated culture. Everything we do relates to those foods, the access. We have to have the ability to harvest, to prepare, to teach our children, to promote that culture, and to so it lasts with them, so they have something for themselves and that connection, because it's important for them to learn that, to be able to share with others, and for us to feast and have feasts. And even like our first foods feast, we open up to the whole community. That means non-Indians, other people, people from Walla Walla. We advertise it in the paper where they come and feast with us. Come share our culture and share this beautiful teaching that we promote for our people. Our foods are protected by the treaty. We have water rights, fishing rights, hunting rights, gathering, grazing. These foods, because the federal government has the obligation that they have to uphold those treaties. Treaties are what's called a superior law of the land. They were established prior to most states. They were here before the states, so they supersede state law. And the federal government has to protect them. They have to be sustainable for us. They have to be safe to eat. They're protected by law. And so the one thing about us, we have Fish and Wildlife. conservation groups that will partner up with us because we're doing the same work, except we do it in a way that we want it to be sustainable so we can live in balance with it, help it, eat it, celebrate it, do our culture around it, and celebrate all that. We want to be able to restore the land and the foods how they always have been. If we find something that needs work, it is our job because we promised them that we would help them. And so our tribe is working to sustain that and to bring the culture back to our tribal members and local community, and to help them be able to practice their sovereign rights, their treaty rights, and to teach them the best way to do that. Because sometimes people break their own rights and so they get in trouble. And to know that if they're going to do something that they're not supposed to do, they're going to get in trouble for it. We have laws, we have teachings, and there's reasons. We want to make sure that those foods are on the land how they always did so we can bring them up to learn their language, their culture. You cannot call yourself a fisherman or a hunter if you're not able to go out there and fish and hunt, make the gut, to prepare it, to cut it, and to do all that process. You can't call yourself a hunter if you don't do that. Just like a heart surgeon can't say, I'm a heart surgeon, if he's never went into surgery and opened the chest of a person, repaired that heart, and that person lives. We don't want to practice in theory, but practice how it has always been. Thank you. If you have any questions, this is a good time.